All right, welcome everyone. Nice to see you. My name is Haley Currier, and I'm the Policy Advocacy Manager at Transform. Transform is a regional land use advocacy and transportation justice organization. Tonight you're here for the Connecting Communities series. This is an event series where we partner with different organizations across the Bay to cover a variety of transportation topics. If you got your and housing topics, if you got your flyer, housing policy and climate, and we have and transportation, and we have two more coming up. On Thursday, November 21st, we have assessing big transportation ideas for the Bay Area, which is in San Francisco, and then we have a webinar coming up on November 12th at 10 a.m. How can congestion pricing advance transportation equity, which is also a report that we put out a couple of years ago. So
there were some really fantastic events that have already happened. Might people be able to catch up on them if they missed excellent ones, like the author of a great book called Trains, Buses, and People, who talked about saving local transit. Is there any way we can catch up on the events we missed?
What a great question. In fact, on your flyer, there is a website, transformca.org/connectingcommunities, which has the links to all of the recordings that, for all of the panels and webinars that we've had so far, which are listed here. Also, a quick thank you to our series co-sponsors, the American Planning Association of Northern California, Commute with Enterprise, EAH Housing, and San Mateo County Office of Sustainability, and DCLEP. And before we get started, we have a quick prize for those who know some things about what we're here to talk about tonight. So our panelists actually have a couple of questions for you.
Okay, ready?
Ready.
Of the 120 million Americans who commute, what percent get free parking at work?
The closest, raise your hand, the closest in the three answers will get a copy of Three Revolutions by Daniel.
It's a really good book.
Yeah.
90%. Commute by car or by?
Commute by car, by driving alone, so it doesn't include carpool.
Okay, we got 90%?
98.
98%? One more guess? 85. 80. Who's closest?
90 is closer than 98.
So
but it's in between.
It's in between. Okay, great.
Wow.
Who said that? Oh, you said that. Okay, here you go. All right, next question.
What a fun way to kick off. I am from the city of Walnut Creek, so I'm curious if anybody knows what tree we use for our logo.
Maybe walnut.
Yeah. Walnut? I guess there isn't like a closest.
It's not like it's on the screen or anything.
Oak? One more.
Is there a third guess?
One more guess.
Black walnut.
Black walnut.
It is an oak tree back there.
Oh.
Just a sad quick story. We just lost it with the last wind event. We just lost our oak tree that was on our logo this last storm. So pretty sad and upset about that.
A good honoring to give a away for the question. All right, last question.
Hello, and thank you for coming out tonight. I'm Christian. I'm with the city of Redwood City. So my question is about Redwood City. Of the offices in Redwood City, how many people drive themselves? What percentage of people drive themselves to work in their own vehicle?
75%.
Raise your hand, over here.
75%?
75% in the back?
You were asking about downtown?
That's downtown Redwood
Oh,
City.
it does downtown.
Yeah, just downtown.
About 50. 50%? Okay, another guess in the back?
60%.
It's 49%. So 50 was
You said that.
I said 50.
Okay, that's pretty close.
Good job. Thank you.
Thanks so much for playing, and Adina's going to introduce our speakers.
Okay. And welcome to the City of Menlo Park. Before I introduce the panel, who here is from Menlo Park? Okay, maybe a little bit less than half. Who is from next door in that direction in Palo Alto? All right. Yeah. Palo Alto's that way. Redwood City. Who's here? Anybody from here from Redwood City? Cool. People from other locations. let's see. We've got a couple of Belmont. And then shout out for some other places.
San Mateo.
San Mateo.
Burlingame.
Okay.
San Francisco, Santa Clara, Caltrain commuter.
Oh, great. Okay, so, who is familiar with a challenge that you have in people getting to your downtown and, 3 or 4 people with a downtown access challenge?
Non-level grade crossings and the issues that they create for pedestrians, bicycles, and cars when the train is at peak commute time.
Okay. Go ahead.
Still Avenue all jammed up.
Okay. Any other downtown access challenges?
Train frequency. Off peak is pretty poor in general.
Go ahead.
Downtown with nothing but parking.
Okay. Any other downtown access challenges?
For me, going downtown at lunch, there is no place to park.
Okay. So that sounds like a conundrum. Not enough parking, yet too much parking. I think we'll actually have some interesting thoughts about that. I think we will have some nice, juicy thoughts about that. Go ahead.
Lunchtime, that's all.
Yeah.
So it's easy to get to downtown for dinner all over Caltrain, but it's not easy to get back home from downtown.
My daughter took the 22 home at midnight last night because she took Caltrain there and couldn't get home.
Okay. Any more before I introduce the panel and we start talking about how we address these challenges?
Insufficient bike infrastructure.
Okay. Okay.
I don't think anyone knows the bus exists, the ECR.
Yeah.
No signage.
Okay.
Too many cars. It's the signals are prioritize automobiles over pedestrians.
Okay. Go ahead, and then we're gonna.
Good north-south connectivity, poor east-west connectivity.
Okay. Good. Got it.
Caltrain does not offer 24-hour parking, much like BART does on the East Bay.
Okay. All right. So we're going to talk about address a number of these questions and a few more. Getting downtown, whether you're coming by car or whether you're coming by walking or biking, whether you're a visitor or whether you are working downtown, has any number of challenges. It's certainly a challenge here in Menlo Park, and that is the goal of this panel that is part of the Transform Connecting Community series and also has sponsorship from Friends of Caltrain, from Menlo Together, which is a local group working on housing affordability, sustainable transportation, and social equity, and a number of other local groups working on similar issues, including Redwood City Forward. And also this is also co-sponsored by the American Planning Association. Tell me the entire name because I do not.
It's the Emerging Planners Group.
Oh, right. Thank you so much. And so we have my name is Adina Levin. I'm the executive director of Friends of Caltrain. And we've got a set of speakers who will shed light on different aspects of this presentation, including Steve Raney, who's the executive director of Palo Alto Transportation Management Association, Ozzy, Arce, who is a transportation planner for the city of Walnut Creek, Christian Hammack, who is in transportation public works with the city of Redwood City. When you introduce yourself, you can give your correct title, which I am incorrectly remembering. And Camacho, who is with Housing Leadership Council. And they're going to go through and do a really lightning, very short self-introduction and a highlight of what they're going to talk about. And then I'm going to ask them a number of questions to really highlight a number of the opportunities and ideas about improving downtown access. Our goal here is not to advocate for one thing or another, but our goal is to provide some food for thought about things that might be relevant for us here in Menlo Park and for other people who are here in some of the other cities wherever you are coming from. So after we'll do some Q&A with the panel to elucidate some of these ideas, and then we'll take questions from the floor, and then head home. All right, so we'll start because Ozzy has come from the furthest away, and some of you may have heard snippets of at least some of these other stories, and many of you may not have heard the Walnut Creek story. So Ozzy, you can get us started.
Great. Should I sit, or do you think I should stand?
Standing is better. We cannot see if it's not.
Okay, great.
Remember, project from the diaphragm.
No, this is great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Adina. My name is Ozzy Arce. I'm an associate planner with the city of Walnut Creek. I left yesterday to make it today. But in all seriousness, we are an East Bay city, about 70,000 people. We are fortunate to have 2 BART stations, one within our city limits, and then one right outside of our city limits, the Pleasant Hill BART station. But I'm here to talk to you today about how we've been able to use parking and some other multimodal strategies as a management strategy to try to increase access to our downtown and our peripheral area, which we refer to as the core area. What I call, what folks, not so much what I call, maybe what folks call a problem, is really the on-street parking and occupancy that we have in our downtown. Now, really quick, just to provide you some context, I'm going to run through some numbers. We have 4 parking zones in our city. It may be difficult to see, but there's a BART station just to the left of the north area. It's that first and last mile gap issue. But as you can tell, we have the core downtown, which is anchored by large retailers such as Nordstrom, Neiman Marcus, Macy's, and Lifetime Fitness, centered by Apple, so you can understand the regional draw that brings, and also our northwest and south areas that kind of serve as a peripheral core area. There's about 10,000 parking spots downtown, so that's not insignificant. There's about 7,000 privately owned, 3,000 city-owned, including about 4 parking garages. Similar to other cities, we have a parking ordinance that calls for that 85% occupancy goal that is very in line with standard practices around parking occupancy numbers. And then we have a process for adjusting those rates on our meters, because we do have on-street meters on all 4 of these zones. The hours are 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., 7 days a week. And that's important because, yes, we do charge on Sundays. We've been able to manage our parking occupancy for the most part. The red dot line is the 85% occupancy. But as you can tell, in our downtown core area, the 85% is exceeded and reaches almost to the 100% occupancy around 2 peaks, which is the lunchtime peak, which someone referenced earlier, and then our dinner peak. And then everywhere else, the rest of the time, the downtown zone is still very popular, but it doesn't exceed that 85% occupancy.
This is just street parking.
This is on-street parking, correct. So I hope that provides some of that context around the city of Walnut.
On-street parking, including your structures, because you mentioned there were 3 structures.
Sorry, this is just on-street parking occupancy. And so, next slide, please. And so, one of the ways that I want to talk to you about 3 solutions that we are putting forth to try to get to that 85% occupancy goal. One is zone-based parking and making data-driven decisions on that zone-based parking. And so what that means is we started what's called a purple pole program. And we marked poles in our peripheral areas as literally as purple poles to encourage these long-term parkers to park in the peripheral zones. right? And what we've noticed is, next slide please, is that the peripheral occupancy did increase in 2018. What these purple zones did was it increased the hours that you're allowed to park there. However, it was slightly more expensive. However, it did drive demand to those peripheral areas, as you can tell through the occupancy change. And then that led to higher utilization, obviously, of the underutilized areas. And then the downtown average dropped as well. So we saw some successes through that zone-based Purple Pole program. Next slide, please. The next initiative I'd like to touch on is our public-private partnerships. One of the things that we've done really well is establish these partnerships with a company called SmartMe, and they're the data analytics folks, right? And allows us to be transparent, accessible, and data-driven. We put all of the SmartMe data on our city website, and you can tell it's really updated the next day. So this is Monday's data, but if we go today, we'll have yesterday's data. And this is on-street occupancy. You can move the time. So again, trying to be transparent, informative to the public, let them know what decisions we make and why it is that we make them. The other partnership that we have is with ParkSmart. They're more of the operator of the lots. And what's great about this partnership is they don't just manage the city's lots, they also manage a significant portion of the private lots as well. And they integrate that data with SmartMe. And so we all working off of one giant informational system that has several API calls.
What's an API?
I don't know what it stands for.
Application Programming Interface. And this is a reminder to all of us experts to find our acronyms, and I will, with great love, remind you. Yeah.
Great. So API calls, right? It's like a feed of information, and we use that feed to build maps like this.
So the point of it is that if you were thinking about going downtown, you'd know whether there was any parking spaces? Is that the point, or what's the point?
Definitely, if you want to understand occupancy, we also just want to be transparent in our occupancy.
But, like, does it even do that? Like, they check their phone before they go downtown?
I mean, regardless, we just want to be transparent.
No, she's asking specifically, can someone check this?
Is it real time?
It's not real time. It is not real time. It is not real time. However, I will tell you, another map that we do have that I didn't show on the website does show real-time occupancy with pricing as well. So, and that's also on the city's website. But essentially the goal of this public-private partnership is to make the most out of every space by using data analytics to understand usage. The last piece that I'll touch on here, and this is my last slide, is kind of the TDM component. So we've been able to create...
What does TDM stand for?
Transportation Demand. And so what that means is the parking ordinance has created an enterprise fund that collects all the meter money, right? All the meter money is fed back into the Downtown Parking Enhancement Fund, which is about an $8.5 million fund that we use to reinvest back into that same core area. And so I'm talking, we have an electric trolley that's free, that comes from the BART station through our downtown to that regional shopping center. It just moved from a 15-minute headway to a 12-minute headway. The city subsidizes that completely. The other thing that we do is reinvest in our pedestrian infrastructure, right? That's low-hanging fruit. The other thing that we've done is increasing our biking infrastructure. Shout out to the biking infrastructure for sure, trying to increase multimodal activity in our downtown. We repurposed, that's the key word. We don't take away parking, we repurpose the right-of-way to increase use of other modes as well. And then we give a shout out to the parking. We understand that in a suburban context like Walnut Creek, folks need to get to downtown, and parking is a viable form to get to downtown. And so we try to increase the parking experience and enhance the parking experience by also making investments in our parking meters. We just purchased new meters last year that also feed again into that SmartMe data, right? And then we just installed a couple of months ago parking sensors in our downtown to try to understand real-time information And the opportunities that come from sensors are great as far as parking management and trying to understand it. And essentially what I'll leave you with is the overall goal of this is to try to make parking a technical exercise, not a political one. And we use data to try to inform not only the policymakers but the public about why it is that we're increasing rates or moving rates or investing in our downtown, and this concept again that parking shouldn't be political, it should be technical. So that concludes my presentation.
All right, thank you, Lou. Questions, I'll bet many more, but let's go on to Christian, and would love to hear about things that Redwood City is doing. Which one is Christian's? The next one. Redwood City. Yeah. Are you coming back? Still in the back? Okay, so I had neglected to welcome people who are elected officials and appointed officials. So before Ray leaves for the Housing Commission, Mayor Ray Mueller of Menlo Park. So thank you very much for coming to the beginning of this.
Thank you.
And to catch the rest, we also have a number of commissioners here, including Katie Ruzzi on the Complete Streets Commission, Henry Riggs on the Planning Commission here in Menlo Park, Pam Baird on the Mountain View Planning Commission. What other commissioners may we have? We have a school board member for the Sequoia Union District, and any other commissioners that I have neglected and forgotten.
Sustainability Commission for Senator.
All right, excellent, welcome. And Christian, tell us about some of the things that Redwood City is doing to help people get downtown.
Thank you. Thank you again for everybody coming out tonight. It's great to see so many people interested in their community. It really makes the effort, the work that we do kind of mean something. So we're here all working to try to make your lives better, and so getting feedback from the community is definitely what helps us to guide our efforts and how we direct our attention. So again, I'm with the City of Redwood City. I'm the Parking and Transportation Demand Manager. I think it was a great lead-in having Walnut Creek talk, because Redwood City follows a very similar model with regards to its downtown parking as Walnut Creek. We do actively try to manage our parking supply and try to kind of price the structure and have different zones similar to as Walnut Creek does. So I'll kind of just start, as many of you know, kind of prior to the current iteration of our downtown, Redwood City in the evenings was a very quiet downtown, and often kind of nicknamed Deadwood City. So in early 2000s, there was a strong push to revitalize downtown and kind of reshape the atmosphere and the feel within our downtown. So that meant looking at the kind of projects that we looked at for redevelopment. We had a strong push to redevelop the area in the downtown. This kind of was anchored, this effort was anchored with bringing in the movie theater into the central downtown, away from the east side of 101 where it originally was. So that kind of gave us that initial kind of pool to get people to thinking about downtown Redwood City as an evening area to venture to. Kind of with regard, at the same time that we were looking at the kind of development that we were promoting, we were revamping our parking system. At that same period, we changed over from many of our meters. Well, we had single space meters around the downtown. So the central core area, like Ozzy mentioned, where we have different zones. We have the central core and the periphery zones. So the central core area, we took out all the single space meters and put in multi-space meters. There was a lot of growing pains with the first rendition of that, but we've kind of gone through that. We've brought it in, we've kind of grown through that and kind of developed through it.
What's the difference? I don't.
So multi-space meter is those little pay stations that you see on the street, and so when you pull in a parking stall, there might be a number, and then you go to the meter, enter your number, and rather than that pole right in front of the parking stall. Yeah. And so right now, Redwood City has about 2,500 meter parking spaces in the downtown. As part of our effort with the redevelopment of the buildings and properties in the downtown, we've entered into several shared parking agreements with these new developments. This is the way that we looked at being able to leverage the development that's going on and the garages and parking spaces that these new private sites are having built and making those spaces available to the public. So approximately 2,000 parking spaces, because of these private agreements, are available to the public evenings and weekends.
So that,
Sorry.
go ahead.
Sorry.
Is this a shared parking agreement? Like with the private spaces, so they use for office workers in the daytime?
In the day, they use it for their office, the people that work at the buildings, and then in the evenings, usually around 5 or 6, it converts over to being open to the public. It's still the office workers, if they're working in the evenings, they still can park there, but the public can also enter the garages and use them at that time also. And so we've gradually, we've been looking at that model. Right now it's mostly evenings and weekends, but we're now expanding that, trying to look at partnerships to allow for daytime use also. So to expand that. Because right now what we're seeing is the occasional crunch that we have is when there's some kind of events in downtown during the day. So in the evenings we have quite the supply, there's plenty of parking for people to find. Maybe it's not as easy to locate, but we're working on that also, so I'll touch on that in a little bit. And so then, as I mentioned, we focused on transit-oriented development, so being in our downtown, having the transit center, being close to the freeway, having Jefferson that leads up to Farm Hill up to 280, there's a lot of good connectivity for our downtown. So we really wanted to leverage that connectivity and try to push to get the additional developments into our downtown. And that was a strong goal for us. And we did that with in mind with considering high-speed rail, Dumbarton rail that might be coming through, eventually maybe a ferry, and there was also, we've been studying a Broadway streetcar to look at taking from downtown to some of the outer areas. And then in the last few years, we've also conducted a citywide transportation plan, which was a large endeavor, kind of looking at transportation in the city as a whole, and kind of looked at how we move forward over the next 20 or so years, and what kind of prioritizing projects to kind of improve our transportation infrastructure. One of the goals of the transportation plan was setting a maximum of, we're trying to achieve that 50% of all trips are done from something other than, that are in the city, citywide, done by something other than a driving trip. So encouraging transit, biking, walking, all the other kind of modes to try to get people out of their vehicles and using something else to kind of reduce the impact on our roads. Next slide. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about your transportation goal of 50% or less solo driving. Congrats! It sounds like you need it, which is amazing.
Well, that goal is citywide. So the downtown is at 49% for the.
I see.
Yes.
Okay.
That's if your goal is 50%, your downtown current is 49%. You have
Yes.
a goal for the downtown.
Well, I'll touch on that in a minute.
Super, great. So let's actually listen, because we might get there. Yeah.
Quick question on the goals for the transportation plan. Is there any analysis behind that on the carbon impacts? For example, the lower the drive alone rate, how does that affect your climate goals and how much carbon you remove?
Yeah, there's been some analysis. I don't have the statistics with me right now, and so we are looking at, and that's definitely a big, looking at the air quality and the impacts to the air and trying to reduce those trips. It definitely, reducing vehicle trips will impact the impacts to the atmosphere and air. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we'll get to that. So kind of the problem, the reason that we're kind of looking at, we've kind of adopted a strong TDM policy, and setting that goal for our citywide transportation plan is what we're seeing. For a little while, there was a thought that maybe vehicle ownership was dropping, but a large part of that showing that it was mainly largely due to the recession. So we're at as high as it's ever been with car ownership, and it's actually as high as it's ever been as far as vehicle miles traveled. So that's the amount of distance that the cars are driving on the road. So you have more cars on the road, driving for longer distance, for longer periods of time. So that's all leading up to additional congestion. So that's why it's really important to have strong goals, trying to achieve these changes in behavior and trying to get drivers to consider other options and get the business community and commuters to have those options available to them.
What region is that?
Oh, those weren't local pictures or anything. Those were just pictures that I took.
The data.
The numbers.
Oh, the data. I think it's from the government. I forget where it was pulled from.
Is that United States?
Yes. It's for the United States.
U.S. Okay.
Yes, U.S. data.
Not Redwood City.
Yeah, not Redwood City. Yes. It's the nation as a whole. Yes. Okay, and so as an effort to kind of help us along towards that goal in our citywide transportation plan, we're taking a strong stance with regards to transportation demand management, TDM as an acronym. It's part of the citywide, the citywide transportation plan. We developed a TDM program that kind of laid out the criteria, guidelines, and thresholds that for new developments to participate in the TDM program. So TDM is basically a series of measures or efforts that a building employer undertakes to kind of provide commuter benefits or alternatives to their employees. So this is part of the process that we try to develop to provide those options to people coming in and out of Redwood City. Right now, so the program was adopted in 2018 with the Citywide Transportation Plan. Right now we're working on a draft ordinance to strengthen that and provide support to it. That'll provide some clarifications and kind of go in more detail on the processes for the actual TDM plans as new developments adopt them. So we see this as a partnership with the developers, and we're working on bringing them into adopting these TDM plans as conditions of approval for all new developments. Depending on the size of the developments, the developers have to adopt a TDM plan. It's approved by us at the city, and then they have to implement that plan as their building gets occupied. And then there's an ongoing monitoring and enforcement if need be to make sure that they comply with the different measures that are adopted in their plan. Because for this, we adopt the specific goals for each of the projects to achieve as part of their plan. So, for example, in downtown Redwood City, new developments are asked to achieve, new office developments are of a larger size are asked to make, so similar to how I said that it was 49%, we're asking them to bring it down to 33% for their drive alone rate.
Okay, but did you catch that? What was that number?
33%. Yes. So we're asking them that the maximum of the people driving themselves to work is 33% of their employees. So, yes, sir.
Are there minimums on how many parking spaces they have to provide per square foot of office space, or?
Yes, I mean, so our current zoning standards do have parking minimums, but as part of the TDM plans, as they adopt it, we're working with them and looking at potentially reductions on those minimums below what the thresholds are, and allowing some variance in that so that they're not obligated. As part of, in addition, like the shared parking agreements, if a project enters into a shared parking agreement with the city, we cut the actual requirement in half from where it originally was. And then again, if they adopt a strong, like a robust kind of TDM plan, there's possible to have reductions further than that too. So, and then so as part of the TDM plans, there's annual monitoring and reporting that's part of the conditions of the plan. And so we use that to kind of see how we're doing and kind of work with the developers to modify the plan as needed as we go forward. And that's that. I think we have a lot of questions, so
we'll take the questions at the end. So we were just talking about transportation demand management, focusing on new developments. And Katie just whispered to me, but like, what about small businesses? Is there anything that can pertain to smaller businesses? And that is part of what Steve Raney is going to talk about, and in terms of the experience with the Palo Alto Transportation Management Association. Looking forward to hearing from what Palo Alto is doing and how that is similar to and different from Redwood City.
Okay, Palo Alto and Menlo Park, do you want small or large traffic reduction?
Large.
Large, that's right. That's what I hear from the Palo Alto TMA, most definitely. And everybody, the Bay Area has the nation's #3 worst traffic congestion. Do we have a traffic emergency? Yes, we have a traffic emergency. And the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says that we have to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 50% in the next 11 years to prevent complete climate dystopia. So do we have a climate emergency?
Yes.
Yes. So second bullet, so we need big non-incremental policies, right? We want to bite things off 10% at a time. Okay, for traffic, that's really hard to do. There's not a lot of examples out there. And yes, I can. How's that? Okay. And there's a real opportunity for leadership to ask for non-incremental change. So your charter from now on is to bring up the IPCC stuff until 2030 to ask for non-incremental solutions. So there's about 8 potential really muscular ways in public policy to reduce traffic, but they're all going to be hard to enact. They will be brutal fights. So I just wanted to highlight one of them. It may not be the best one, but what if we could cap drive-alone commuting at 50% from, in some places it's a lot higher than that, and we kind of model it after Stanford Campus's commute program, and we do it in a clever way where we charge drive-alone commuters $3 a day, collect that money and give it to everybody else who doesn't drive alone. So there's no cost to employers, which is a big deal. And we could apply it to current and new buildings. So if you had the opportunity, if you're elected to put this on the Menlo Park ballot, would you vote for this? Okay, it takes a 2/3 vote, so it's not an easy thing to enact, but that's the kind of thing that has some promise. So I showed a picture there of 4 cities holding hands and jumping in together on that from a policy standpoint, because it's kind of scary. So let's go on to the next slide. So how much does it cost employers to get one person to stop driving alone for a whole year? The answer is it costs a lot, a surprising amount. The first row there is the Gates Foundation in Seattle. So they charge their drive-alone commuters, SOV, single occupancy vehicle, $12 a day. And if you don't SOV, you get $3. So that we actually make money on this. So that's sort of clever of them. And then a Stanford-like commute program is more sort of break-even. And why can't we just get people to bike and carpool? Because that's really cheap and dumb and obvious. But like GoPass,
What's GoPass?
Getting an annual pass for Caltrain that applies employer-wide, so anybody can use that. Costs roughly $800 a year if you have high utilization of Caltrain. And then the next 4 are Palo Alto TMA programs, so rather than the employer paying for that, we're paying for that. Now, if you're Palo Alto...
Did you say what a TMA was before?
Transportation Management Association, trying to reduce traffic. So if you're a Palo Alto taxpayer, were you expecting to take $1,600 from the general fund to get one person to shift mode? No, like maybe like $200 or $300 a year might be okay. But so in Palo Alto, we actually take parking permit revenue to fund the TMA. So the people who drive alone and come in from out of town fund the TMA's programs. So that's a little better financial story than what you might have thought. But point is, it's really expensive. And then if you look at the purple item there, in Palo Alto, we're considering building a new parking structure. And so that may cost roughly $4,000 per space per year when you take in all that capital costs and stuff. So we argue TDM is less expensive than building a new parking structure, which is blindingly expensive and then just brings more cars in.
Yeah, if you do a stack, group rapid transit, bicycles, pedestrians, other mobility, and canopy in the top part of the group rapid transit, that would be less expensive than that.
Okay, we'll have a freewheeling discussion after this, but did you guys catch these numbers? Because I'm sure if I was sitting back there, I would not be able to read this. The cost of a new structured parking space is $3,900, and the cost to provide a Caltrain pass is at $4,000 for parking, $3,000 for a Caltrain pass, $1,600 for a carpool program. So
I totally don't get the difference between the different Go Passes. Like, what are they?
So Go Pass matters how many people use it, how cost effective it is.
Because they have to buy them.
Because the employer has to buy it for all employees, and if nobody uses it, then they're just throwing money away. Right? But if a lot of people are using it, then
But does that work on other modalities other than Caltrain?
No, Caltrain has really weird pricing.
if you have some questions about transit fares and you ask a question in the end, we will get an answer, but not right now. Okay.
Could you just quickly clarify when you say 3,900 for one parking? That's for that's annual,
That's
over
operating
subject.
expense.
Yeah, so
That's the operating expense.
Capital and operating amortized?
So say 300 space parking structure, for you a special deal, $24 million. You're going to take out a 30-year fixed payment mortgage at 3.8%, and that's most of it. And then there's $500 per space to operate it and maintain it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like each spot is costing like 30 to 50,000 in California.
Yeah,
right?
exactly right. So it's blindingly expensive. And then we cover two more things. So the third one from the bottom. If you're Facebook and you run your own bus network, it's really expensive to run that. It's a lot more expensive than other things, like $3,500 or more, $5,000 per year to get somebody into that bus. So it's great if you're a tech company, but a lot of employers can't afford that. And then some employers have been paying their employees to live close to work, giving them like a $10,000 a year housing subsidy. So that's great if you can do that. But most employers, Coupa Cafe cannot afford to do that. For baristas. Okay, let's move on to the third and last slide. Then, from an equity standpoint, what Palo Alto TMA does is pretty interesting. Right? So if you're a service worker at Coupa Cafe, it's kind of hard to schlep all the way in Palo Alto to make people coffee. So we have a low-income transit pass program where we buy transit passes for people earning $70,000 or less per year. And so for some people, it's a difference between whether they're going to work in downtown Palo Alto or not. So it is getting pretty tough to actually go to a shishi dinner in Palo Alto and actually get somebody to actually bring the food to you. Where is that person coming from? So downtown Palo Alto, restaurants, hotels, nurses' homes, banks, and retail. A lot of service workers. Very high turnover, like 200% of people per year. And we're the only program, only city in the U.S. that's doing this full subsidy of transit. And again, the city funds our program from parking permit revenue from those bad people who come in and commute and park in our parking structure.
They're not bad. They're just.
They're not bad.
Maybe they're 87 like my dad.
So, and there's a couple testimonials below anyway, people saying, hey, changed my life. Somebody else saying, I couldn't hire people without this program.
How many people are using this program?
So, 240.
240.
So, that's it for me.
All right, well, thank you. And we'll get to some more questions later, but first, so another way for people to help people get downtown is, well, what if they are already living downtown? And that $10,000 for a housing subsidy is really quite something. So Karen Camacho of Housing Leadership Council will talk about getting downtown if you live there.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. So, my name is Camacho. I'm an organizer with the Housing Leadership Council of San Mateo County, and we're a nonprofit organization that works with communities and their leaders to produce and preserve quality, affordable homes. So that's our main mission, to get the political will and power to be able to do that. So there are many, issues. And we talked about, parking, transportation, but the affordable housing component is very important. One of the greatest issues that we have in our Bay Area is the fact that the home prices are increasing, correct? And incomes are not. So the gap is widening, and in San Mateo County, for example, the average median income for 2019 for a family of 4 is $136,000 annually. So that's actually a little bit more than last year, so $118,000. And for a firefighter or a restaurant cook, that is not affordable. And the other issue that we have is that we are also failing to build enough homes for the people that need it. So if you look at the people who are earning an income level that is very extremely low income, very low income, we're not building as many homes as for people that are higher income earners. Next slide. So as an organizer, I work a lot in the community and hear a lot of stories about people that are being impacted by this. There's someone who is a florist who has to commute from Oakland to San Mateo and wake up extremely early to avoid traffic. A small business owner who's not able to retain her workers because of the long commute that they have to make. Next slide. So today I want to provide several examples of successful developments with affordable housing developers where you can build housing in downtown so that people can live close to their jobs and not have to commute these long distances. So one example is Altamira and Hayward. They were able to partner with the city of Hayward, the affordable housing developer Eden Housing, and market rate developer Amcal Multi-Housing. They partnered together to build 357 homes for folks that could, be within a walking distance to BART. This was 151 affordable housing units and 206 market rate units. And so what was really beautiful about this partnership, next slide, is that they were able to redevelop a vacant surface level parking lot as well as an automobile shop and really, create this vibrant community. Again, incentivizing folks to use public transportation. The folks in the Eden Housing Development received free transit passes to be able to use BART. So this really incentivized them. Next slide. The other example that I want to provide is Oxford Plaza in Berkeley. This development was for 97 sustainable, affordable homes, and this was specifically for extremely low-income families. And they had an underground parking lot for 100 spaces. So here the city was very concerned about parking and really and donated the land, but they required that the affordable housing developer provide housing that would be managed by the city. So one thing that we heard from our partners is that it's very difficult when you're being donated the land. So this is making your project feasible, but you're being required to provide more parking for more people. So that was one of the biggest challenges that they had to face. Next one. And the final example is actually in Palo Alto, 801 Alma. This development was again with Eden Housing, and they were able to provide 4 stories of affordable housing just within walking distance of the Palo Alto transit system, so near buses and trains. And this is really wonderful because people can actually access resources and amenities, healthcare, they can go to the local CVS and get whatever they need. There's restaurants nearby. So it really creates this inclusive community where folks that would, work in our local stores can actually live near downtown. So those are some of the main examples. Next slide. And there are many solutions to this problem, but the three main things that we need are funding, land, and leadership. And that's what we ask of everyone to think about. It's very challenging when we are not really thinking about the intersection between transit management and housing. We should be getting funding for developments that are able to be sustainable and really help ameliorate, transit. We need the land. Land is so scarce in the county. And in San Mateo County, for example, 75% of our land is preserved, which is really great. But in that 25%, we really need to make sure that everything is accessible and central. And again, we need leadership from our city council, county board of supervisors, and at the state level as well. Next slide. So later on, I'll talk about many of the solutions, but I do want to share a story, and I want you all to think about a family that lives in Tracy, where one parent is the caretaker of 3 children. The other parent has one car that drives out all the way down here to San Mateo, and the parent that has to stay home cannot have any sort of economic mobility. So it's a really great challenge when all the jobs are here, but the homes are not. So I'll leave that you all with that. Thank you.
So I had a bunch of questions, but I think I'm going to open this up. And before I open it up, you may have seen the advertisement of this that said that Billy Riggs was going to moderate. He's a professor in San Francisco, and he is on the planning commission in the city of Palo Alto. But unfortunately, he has the flu, so I am here moderating in his stead. Do you, any questions that you have collected for the panelists? Okay.
So, the frustrating thing, especially with your speech or your talk, is that every time I talk to a developer about affordable housing, they say it doesn't pencil. Unless you're at densities of above like 120 units per acre. And then when you talk to the community, they say, well, I don't want anything over 3 stories. Run with that.
So, that is one of the greatest challenges that there is opposition to, the image of having this big development that is higher than 3 stories in front of you. But I think as a community, we always have to talk about the stories and the people that we are excluding from accessing resources by not allowing that to happen. So it's not about the building, it's about the people, right? And I think that is the direction in which we hope that all of us come to talk about in those kinds of situations. And in terms of not penciling out, we are, as an organization, we really advocate for more funding for affordable housing so it does pencil out. And we, as an organization, we really think about what is feasible. So we'll go into different cities and advocate for inclusionary policies. These are policies that require market rate developments to include a certain percentage of affordable homes. And there's so many examples of, projects that have penciled out. So it might be more than that they're worried about.
If I may, there's also a responsibility and a role for the city to play as far as the parking requirements that they ask of these developments. And is there an opportunity to reduce those parking requirements in areas that are proximate to transit? The city of Walnut Creek has a proximate parking standard that's different than the parking standard throughout the city. And I would argue that there's even another opportunity in today's transit world to look at that once more to see if we can further reduce that of our proximate standard to make sure that these projects do pencil.
So, thank you for all your speech. I've used the shuttle many times to get to the downtown from BART. I just would quickly like to introduce myself. I'm an urban planner, I'm a design consultant, and I'm here today because we are working on the Santa Clara downtown project, and connectivity to Caltrain is one of the major concern that our community, I live in Santa Clara, is facing, like how to connect to the Caltrain station. So that's why I'm here to learn lessons of what you guys have been doing. My question is, what have been your challenges with curbside management, especially looking at the amount of Lyft and Uber inundating our cities, and we all use it. I am using it. I am not against it, but it needs to be managed. And also now seeing the new patterns of micromobility, especially scooters and dockless bikes. And I don't know if these cities have tested, but San Francisco knows they have.
Well, so one thing on Lyft and Uber that some of the planners and policymakers are pursuing is increasing incentives for higher occupancy and penalizing one-person trips or 40% of the time you're driving around with nobody in there, just the driver. So that has some potential just to make things a little bit more efficient.
But do you make dedicated loading zones for Lyft and Uber in your downtown areas?
Yeah,
no, they just
Ozzy, Christian, any thoughts on that?
On the bike lanes?
So I mean, in Redwood City, I mean, we haven't made any specific dedicated loading zones. We are evaluating as new projects come in, looking at the areas, seeing if there's going to be a confluence of those kind of trips. I looked at a recent study. I forget off the top of my head who it was by, but they evaluated 9 of the largest metropolitan areas and evaluated Lyft and Uber trips. And they said that approximately 60% of those trips are replacing an alternative mode trip. So they're not necessarily taking someone out of a car. A lot of them are taking people off of transit, off of bikes, off of walking or other general trips. So that's one of our concerns with the expansion of these trips. I think only 20% are actually new trips that are being provided. So there's definitely a concern with how Lyft and Uber are being used. I know there's discussions about how to maybe geofence areas to kind of only let them do Lyft pick up and drop off in certain areas to try to control some of that. The concern is with creating Uber and Lyft specific zones is a lot of the drivers themselves just stop wherever's convenient. Half the time, I'm sure you see them in your downtowns or your busy areas. They just stop in the middle of the lane, let people out, and so it is a challenge with as is all new technology. So we're still working on how to incorporate that. We don't have any specific agreements at this time with Lyft or Uber, and I think some of the larger cities are going that route and having a little bit more control. But I think us smaller cities are still struggling a little bit to figure out how to balance the curb space and the use, and trying to get them to actually, if we do dedicate space, to actually use it. So
I'm going to chime in on that because the City of Mountain View and their Transportation Management Association is doing a pilot program to help people get around in the middle of the day, and they give a discount on Lyft or Uber. But the challenge is that a condition of this program was supposed to be these are going to be shared rides, and Lyft and Uber have not actually been providing the data that they said they would when this pilot was set up. And this was something that the City of Mountain View has reported on, and that's a significant challenge because if the city does want to use it for shared rides and those providers are not providing the data, then that is a real drawback to using it for that purpose. Jen.
Okay, thank you this is really informative. I have 2 quick questions. Well, one is to get your real-time data on where the parking spots are, is it only sensor-based, or how are you collecting that data? And then my second question is with the development agreements to the shared parking, can you do that to existing parking, or only to new construction? Well, when you're doing the shared parking with the companies, the daytime and nighttime. So
Are you talking about like shared parking agreements between a development, like
Yeah.
a new development and
Well,
an
what you
existing
were talking about,
development?
like Box and Redwood City.
Yes.
So if we had existing offices that haven't had a development that aren't
Yeah.
asking for anything, how do we get them to?
Unfortunately, we're really limited in that. So,
So the development agreement.
our best opportunity is with the new developments. So it's kind of, I know people shy away from like seeing the new development, and there's a lot of subset of the community that doesn't want to see further development. But that new development also provides improvements to the infrastructure, to the city, allows for these agreements. So there is a lot of benefits that do come along with the new development. We just have to be mindful of the development that occurs and make sure it's following in line with our vision of the city.
And the shared parking agreement, we have a vessel that you can use a conditional use permit to apply for a shared parking agreement. If you're a new developer and you see that there's an underutilized parking garage next door, you can go to the planning commission, assuming that you have that land development's buy-in as well. You can do a shared parking agreement. So new and existing.
Yeah, so wait a second. I just heard the word existing. So how does it work with existing? If you have a business, they have extra parking that they're not using, what does the city do there?
You can justify it through the parking study, right? A developer can hire consultants to do a parking study to justify to the planning commission why it is that they can share, right? So let's say it's an office building that is only occupied during business hours, and then there's a multifamily project that's looking to come in right next door. There's an argument to be had about which hours are used, or which hours the parking is used, and whether there's opportunities for shared parking.
And what's the benefit to the existing
It could be a monetary benefit, potentially, if that's what the contract speaks. I will say also to your first question about data collection, I'm really excited about data collection. There's a lot of opportunities there, not only with Lyft and Uber, and hopefully trying to get them to work on giving cities some of that data to make more informed decisions, but also around parking. Those new parking meters that we purchased are also connected to the Smarking company, and the sensors are also connected through another company though, but they also have with that same API call that the Smarking system can receive, right? So it's about integrating these at a larger scale, because when we do fit into shared micromobility and we do start engaging in those conversations, they also have similar information in that data. And in a perfect world, and this is me nerding out, is I would have a system where you can view not only parking information and make informed decisions in real time, but also shared micromobility information as well as Lyft and Uber.
Yeah, and in a perfect situation, we should have this data for
I hear
the entire region, not by city.
I hear
They
you.
should talk to each other.
All right, so gentleman in the back, and then Milo, and then Fran.
So, you guys all have talked about traffic being a huge issue, but each one of your cities requires a minimum amount of parking for new development. If traffic is the issue, and parking, I think in the words of the world's premier parking scholar, is the aphrodisiac of traffic, why not abolish the parking minimum, move to a market-based parking regime, or in fact, charge the developers for trying to include more parking downtown to try to disincentivize more traffic coming to your downtowns. You're each going to have, within the next 5 years hopefully, something approaching a rapid transit service coming into downtown, with Caltrain going to 6 trains an hour off peak, or I guess it's 6 trains an hour on peak, but then eventually it'll be 6 trains an hour off peak. So why not try to move to something like that? Where climate change is really the crisis of this century, and all that. Yeah.
Parking requirements, how are the cities here dealing with them? And Karen, you also have examples from the housing that you work with. I'll start with the city transportation and parking people.
Yeah, so it's definitely something that we're looking at, and it needs a little further exploration as far as reducing. Those take code changes. It takes a lot of political effort to make some of those changes, but it is definitely something that we're currently discussing and looking at. As mentioned with the TDM plans, that gives us more flexibility to kind of reduce those ratios, given that the development's going to have a robust system to kind of offset those potential trips. But definitely that's something that we're working towards. I think it'd be nice to have that kind of right size parking requirement. Right now, I think we size parking based off of IT trip generations and stuff like that. Transportation engineers standards, and they're very conservative in how they approach the trip generations for different types of projects. So
infamously very conservative in the amount of parking that they keep.
And that's one of the things that we saw with in the environmental analyses that were done for a lot of the new downtown projects. They evaluated trip generations, and what we were seeing is significant lower trips compared to what was estimated through the environmental analysis. So yeah, definitely there's opportunity to look at reducing that. It's an ongoing discussion, and hopefully we can get there.
Fran, you did your
yeah, thanks. And I think all of the cities that are represented here tonight have paid parking in the downtown area. And maybe my question is most specifically for Walnut Creek because of the amount of parking revenue you have. Small businesses, employee in a small business often doesn't work in a facility that has parking available there. What would it cost an average employee to park per day in Walnut Creek, street parking?
So, street parking, so it really depends where they park. I think one thing
let's say they're in that downtown corner.
The devil's in the detail.
What's available for a worker, including somebody that is not making a ton of money?
Including the purple pole.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
It'd be helpful if maybe if we can shoot back to that slide that has the maps of the zones.
Yeah.
The devil's in the details. Just really quick, the meter out. I mentioned the meter hours, but I will mention the cost of the parking in the downtown zone, which is that core area. It's $2 an hour.
What was that?
$2 an hour to park in the downtown core area. It's 1 hour in the north, south, and west area, $1 an hour. And then 2 hour time limits in the core.
There's a time limit.
There's 2 hour time limits in the core. And then, however, those purple poles, we've extended it to 10 hours.
Okay, so in that downtown core, can they repark in the downtown core, or is it like Palo Alto with colored zones and you cannot repark in the same zone?
So folks can repark. And do we see workers running out from the coffee shops to go feed the meters? Of course, right? And so for us, should that parking spot be made available to maybe a patron that's looking to come in for 15 minutes and whatnot? And that's why I think through pricing, we can drive some of these. We can influence where folks park.
What's the cost in the purple area?
It's
$1 an hour.
I believe it's still $2 an hour.
Okay, so
in the downtown core area, but we've enticed it by increasing the time limit on that. And so that to me would be the coffee shop worker that doesn't have to run out and feed the meter.
That's $20
So
a day.
doesn't Palo Alto have a special price for low-income workers? What's Palo Alto doing to help the
a huge discount, right, for low-income workers below like 50,000. So like $100 a year for parking permit versus
so they get a
$800
permit
per year.
for one of the garages.
They get a permit, but usually it's on street, far away. Yes.
Parking in Palo Alto downtown free?
No, there's 2 hour zones,
And
like
2 hour zones, okay.
for spaces, but then you can also get into
And it's free.
garages. And it's free, but you've got to move it, right? So the Starbucks workers have to move every 2 hours.
And
they typically get two $45 tickets per month.
And I would like to say, and this will be a short point, because there are equity concerns when you deal with pricing and parking as well. There is a monthly parking pass that is $40 for anyone to receive. However, I think that's why I ended with that last slide that speaks to the other investments that we make towards access the downtown. Like I mentioned, the trolley moved from 15-minute headways to 12-minute headways. That's an extra bus an hour. It's free every time the bus comes to the stop. That's an extra bus an hour. Like I mentioned, we are increasing the pedestrian and bicycle experience in our downtown as well, and hiring more public safety and code enforcement officers, again, for that area, because there are equity concerns when you deal with parking and pricing.
So it's not cheaper to park further away, it's just you get to park longer?
Correct.
In Redwood City, is it cheaper to park further away?
Yeah, so Redwood City, similar, has two different zones. In the core downtown area, it's $1 per hour. The difference, though, in Redwood City, other than Broadway, we don't have a time restriction. So you can park in the core for 10 hours or 2 hours, except for Broadway. Broadway has a 2-hour time limit. The difference, though, is in the periphery area, currently it's $0.25 per hour. So $2 if you did an 8-hour day. In addition, we provide monthly passes to one of our garages that we market to employees. A lot of businesses take advantage of that. It's approximately $60 for a monthly pass to park in the garage, and there's a time limit, but it's essentially from like 6 in the morning to 7 p.m. at night during the weekdays. If you need a little bit more time, or on the weekends, then the permit's a little bit more. But it's approximately $60 for most employees.
Thank you.
Cool. So Milo, I'm going to take a few more questions, and then like up to, but not including 8:15. Milo.
So regarding Lyft and Uber and this discussion about curb cuts and bus service, it seems like the natural progression would be some sort of hybridized pseudo on-demand municipal van. And I realize there might be some technological issues, but what are, from a room of planners or, other people maybe, what would your take be on the feasibility of that, the challenges of that, the advantages, and is that something that we might do or why not?
I'm big on robo-vans, and the average cost per passenger mile for a bus in the U.S. is like $1. So you're losing money every passenger mile, but if you get rid of the driver and go with smaller vehicles and higher frequencies, then potentially you can get to maybe 25 cents per passenger mile. So you could run that kind of transit at a profit. So that's a perpetual motion machine. So you can really scale it up if you can do that. So there's just a real potential economically, if you hit the right economics, to really be transformational and really scale rapidly.
All right, so Mark, gentleman in the blue, and Diane.
Okay. So if you have elevated group rapid transit and bicycles and pedestrians going above the traffic lights and above the stop signs, that means you get to go straight through, you're going to go faster. The people down below are looking at these people going by them while they're stopped at the light or stopped at the stop sign. And you can make it very inexpensive because we have new materials and a 1965 developed technology, structural geometry, which make it cheaper, especially if you do it all over the place. So you need ribs. We have these north-south spines.
Group rapid transit. I think you've explained it. Group rapid transit. Is there any initiatives to do group rapid transit? Why or why not?
Google and Facebook. Google says they won't.
For their employees.
I've been in business development, so I can attest that I was never successful. But it's such a great idea, but it's really hard to muscle through an innovative technology. And so, like in the UK, if the government had intervened, we'd be a lot farther along, but alas.
Okay, Diane?
Yeah, I wanted to comment on parking minimums that the city of San Jose is taking up this issue this spring. And that'll be really important to watch to make sure that affordable housing, in particular downtown, isn't saddled with parking requirements that then force them to diminish the size of the units that they're offering. But I wanted to go back to the climate question, and there was a commenter who kind of hopefully facetiously asked, are we in a climate crisis? Yes. we're experiencing a fivefold greater wildfire impact right now from climate change, that's just now. And Steve, talked about the IPCC study that said that we need to have our carbon emissions cut in half, greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. That's 10 years away, if you do the math. And so I'm just wondering, with improvements to downtown access and moving people away from solo driving, how can we quantify the climate benefits of those measures? We know that there are benefits to business when we boost people access downtown. We know that there are quality of life benefits, and people enjoy having more modes and mobility choices. But how do we quantify the climate impacts and work together with climate advocates to promote mobility solutions?
So, the big California climate plan has led to the region actually adopting an objective of essentially reducing per capita driving by 20%. I don't think anybody, it's not really socialized very much, but it actually is required to make the models work to hit the target. So a lot of electrification, a lot of increased fuel efficiency, but also some behavior change in that. So 20% reduction essentially of solo driving Bay Area wide is essentially what we've already signed up for. We're not tracking or doing anything about it, but so very exciting. So hence I think some muscular behavior changing pricing measures are called for if we're going to be serious about protecting the climate.
So one thing to watch is Plan Bay Area, where the region is looking to look at what they're going to do, and the region ran their models and they came up with, we're not going to achieve our goals. So this is going to be an opportunity to talk to the region, saying we need to have new, stronger ideas, maybe like some of the ones that Steve talked about, in order to achieve the goal. Gentleman in blue, Alan, and Rap.
Okay. If I may ask two questions. The first one is, in Redwood City, I think we had, I think Stanford started running their clinic shuttle about 12 years ago, and there are a lot more shuttles, and I wonder what observations that you've seen, whether they make the traffic better or worse, what's their role? That's the first question I'd like to ask. And the second one is, I noticed that we're talking about downtown accessibility issue, but these local buses are completely missing from any of the presentations tonight. And I'd like to know your thoughts about that.
So you were talking about the Stanford Marguerite circulating 1 or 2 miles
Well,
around?
I was thinking more in terms of Redwood City and Stanford when they started the clinic 1,000 years ago. But I think they ran probably one of the first shuttles. But now there are several companies, to Mid-Peninsula, Redwood Shores, etc.
Oh, more the commute.
Yeah,
the commute
If I could
special.
just tag along to that question is what is the cities doing to work with our county transit agencies to, instead of having private shuttles, incentivize all of us using buses, because it's easy for Google and Facebook to start their shuttles. But yeah.
So right now, Redwood City partners with commute.org. They operate we actually run several shuttles in Redwood City. A lot go to and from the Caltrain station. Similar to the ones that to go to Stanford Medical. Now with the new development and the opening of the Stanford University campus, they've supported that with bringing in their Marguerite shuttle. That's actually open to anybody can use it. It's not just the Stanford employees. So other people that work down in that area can hop on that shuttle and go down there. But we have shuttles that go from the Caltrain to down to those campuses, also down to Seaport. There's a couple that go down there. We have ones that go into Redwood Shores. So there's several shuttles that we were looking at and partnering. Running shuttles is tough. It's consistency is very important. The minute I know that the commute.org had some issues in the past couple of years being able to retain drivers, because a lot of the high-tech companies are running their own shuttles, and they're offering more than what these regional organizations can afford as far as wages. We've kind of worked through a lot of those issues, and we've kind of got things squared away. But the shuttles are running really consistent now. And they do transport a lot of people to and from the different office parks and throughout Redwood City. They operate shuttles in all many cities across the San Mateo County. Commute.org does.
So in addition to Commute.org, Samtrans is doing this Reimagine Samtrans to look at how they might be able to improve their service, and they have some money that San Mateo County raised with Measure W that they can afford it. So if you have good ideas, look for Reimagine Samtrans and give
ReimagineSamtrans.com.
Alan and then Katie at
and
Forever.
a shout out to Genentech for their commute buses where they open up the seats to other employers. That's cool.
I mean, I was shocked. As someone who rarely is in this area, I was very shocked coming in from the Dumbarton Bridge and seeing all those shuttle buses just waiting. Oh my gosh. Like, wow, there has to be an opportunity and a conversation about how we can shift that money towards maybe public transit investments for sure. I'll tell you the successes that we've had with that shuttle. That's a County Connection is the operator. It's a public transit operator. The city invests about $250,000 every year is what it costs to run that shuttle. But again, it's free, it's electric, and it's frequent. And we have had successes because it's one of the most popular routes in the entire County Connection fleet. So do it. Invest in that public transit.
Alan, Katie, and then if folks can stay, we can chit-chat a little bit while clearing out.
So I wanted to say this toward the end, this is a big left turn. You guys were wise enough to hand out copies of the Three Revolutions as a prize book, and Steve already mentioned, robo vans as a favorite direction to go, and I really want to go there. The Three Revolutions are autonomous, electric, and shared, and here we've got our favorite tech superhero, Elon Musk, has been telling everybody that he's ready to drop full autonomous mode within the next year or so. A lot of the industry says, well, within 5 to 10 years, there's going to be substantial penetration into the marketplace. If it's privately owned, it brings a disastrous wave of autonomous hell that exacerbates all of the transit and parking problems. If it is electric and shared, then it really brings huge answers to the last mile problem, to the limitations to transit of drivers, to the parking issues.
Are your cities looking at those policy issues, or are we going to need to deal with that at the state level, regional level?
So I hear you, and I think the biggest piece to that is the shared, the pool, because congestion will still exist if we have autonomous, even electric, right? And so it's a delicate conversation to have. But what I'll tell you is realistically, I think cities are trying to grasp and understand how it's going to be unveiled. And I'll just give you a really quick story about maybe the how. Is we were having a discussion around, of course, parking requirements for a multifamily project, and they wanted to propose doing a very tight valet parking style, right? Where you, as a resident or even a visitor of the building, you could drop your car off, valet, someone would park it, right? The conversation we were having at the staff level was about the spacing that we would leave between the cars and how much of a drop-off and pickup zone should we allow for the circulation of these cars. And I thought, here's an opportunity where we can be visionary and not take issue with their valet parking proposal, because what we understand is at the very basic level, cars are parking themselves now, right? Like on street. And so we may not see the levels of autonomous vehicles that folks are envisioning in the near future, but I think what is going to come is these small bits that I think cities have to ask themselves, are we being too stringent on even spacing requirements if in the future, the near future, these cars are parking themselves, because Toyota already has commercials that show you that they do it, right? So I think that's where we can start to really put it in kind of realistic terms and not try to think too far into the future.
Okay. Katie, wrap, and then schmooze at the end. Good.
All right. Last futuristic question. I'm really
When we talk about charging for parking around here, we have a kind of an interesting retail mix where there's hardware stores and drugstores and the post office, but also like the place where you buy a $50 steak and get your nails done. And those are different customers and different kinds of trips. And I'm wondering if you've seen if you've observed sort of a symbiotic relationship between managed parking and charging for parking and sort of the ways in which retail mix shifts. And if you have any thoughts that you might want to share about what that might look like. You know, we want a more vibrant downtown, we're scared to charge for parking. Talk about that.
In all honesty, Redwood City's had charged parking for decades now, so it hasn't changed a lot. We did a few years ago, we did raise our prices, but in all honesty, it had very little impact, and we're seeing more people visiting downtown than previous years. So I think for the actual visitors, it has a much smaller impact. It's an incremental change, where it's the employees that need to be considered, and that you need to think about the opportunities to kind of relax or dampen that impact on those employees. Most of the business owners, they're the ones that are feeding the meter, parking all day in front of their businesses, and then complaining that there's not parking available nearby. So they can the change in pricing doesn't affect them too much. But it's the employees where you really need to focus on and make sure there's accommodations
Like accessibility and equity.
Yeah.
I just have one comment about the whole session. Just quick. We were talking so much about parking and we're talking so much about cars. We did not talk about what are these cars connecting. It's a major land use issue also. Like if we remove the reason for people to own cars.
All right, let me ask a final question of Christian and put him on the spot because this is the planning department and the transportation department. But how much housing has Redwood City added since its last downtown plan?
I think we were up near 2,000 units in the downtown, so it was what we would push forward towards.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and now Redwood City, I think as of Monday, is looking at some potential replanning and looking at what other steps it might be taking in terms of having more homes as well as more other kinds of uses downtown. So if you are downtown and you are living near stores and you're living near transit and you're living near your job and you can afford to do that no matter how much you make, that is the really a very effective way to not have to drive very much. And I think you quoted the mode share number, the driving rate for working, but the driving rate for people who live downtown is also about approximately 50%. And so that is, to drive less and reduce the carbon and reduce the vehicle miles traveled. One of those strategies and solutions is being able to live downtown, and then, including if you make a lot of money, or there's things that we can do if you do not make quite as much money. And with that, I'd like to really thank the panelists.